Hello, everybody. Ian Barkin here again. Thank you so much for joining me on OneTAKE Live, our LinkedIn live streaming experiment. Also going out now over Twitter Live as well, so that's kind of cool. With a little bit of background, OneTAKE was a chance for us to talk to visionaries, leaders, thinkers on the future of work, life, and culture in their specific field. And we're all home now, so we've decided to go live streaming this over LinkedIn, which is really cool, actually, because it gives us a chance to reach out and talk to so many friends around the world. Before we get started, I hope everyone is healthy, is safe, is taking care of themselves, their families, and their communities. If you do find yourself out of work, I always like to remind folks, especially if you were in retail or leisure or travel industry, you know how to keep customers happy, and Sykes is always hiring. So please do check out sykes.jobs.com. We've got a great work-at-home capability, sykes.jobs.com. And if you are joining us on this live stream, please share your name, share your location. James McMaster has already done that. Hello, James from Glasgow. Great to have you. Thanks so much. And please share your questions with us as well, with me and with our guest. You're going to want to ask questions this time. So we are in an industry where effectively everything has changed, right? Really, whatever industry you're in, everything has changed. Every dynamic about how we serve or how we're served, how we produce, etc. And so I couldn't be more thrilled to have my next guest who has a unique perspective on a massive global industry. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Phil Fersht to OneTAKE. Phil Fersht, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ian, how you doing? Happy Friday.
Thank you. So Phil, this is the part where I awkwardly talk about you and you sit there and I guess smile. So for those who don't know Phil, and in our industry, it's hard not to know Phil. Phil really started, he's been an analyst for a long time. He worked at IDC, he worked at Gartner, he worked at Everest, he worked at Yankee. And Phil, it was probably 12-ish longer years ago, you had a blog that was called Horses for Sources. And you followed your passion and you created and founded HFS Research. Horses for Sources is shortened to HFS. And HFS is well known in our industry for a few things. One, for having incredible analysts, having unique insight, a real passion for really getting to the truth, and what has been so fun for me over the last many years through my friendship with Phil and through watching and absorbing the research and insight is HFS is unabashed about really calling it like it is, calling out the BS, and sharing this really honest point of view on the state of the industry. So Phil, first, I guess, thank you for that. But let's go back even a little further first. Tell us about yourself. What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you want to be a game-changing industry analyst or something else?
Wow, no one's asked me that question for a while. What did I want to be when I grew up? I wasn't that ambitious, to be honest with you. I think I kind of wanted to be a lawyer or something when I was younger. Just wanted to make some money like everybody else. And then I graduated in around 94, which was like the pit of a recession back in the 90s. And you couldn't even get a job at like McDonald's graduate scheme and all that stuff back in those days. And I just got a little lucky, found a job as a junior analyst in a software reseller and learned a lot from the industry, learned the market research qualifications and all that, and just started really enjoying being paid to learn, basically, being a paid academic. And the analyst industry was a pretty exciting time in the late 90s, as all probably remember, when the internet really took stock, the dot-com era, and it was a lot of fun, but it wasn't really a defined career. Most people, my boss at the time just said, you'll do this for about 2 years and then you'll go off and do something else. You go work for a vendor or something. But then I think a lot of us fell into the industry, really loved it. And a lot of those analysts from the late 90s have stuck around. So that's why if you go to an analyst conference these days, or when we used to go to analyst conferences, you've got a fair few older generation folks, shall we say, who've been doing this for a long, long time. So this is a career that has evolved in the last sort of 10, 15 years. And a lot of us who do it really enjoy it. It's a privilege to do this. And And I'm very pleased that I'm able to do it in a company that I founded with a bunch of really smart people who do a lot of the hard work these days. So there we go.
That's great. Wow, thank you so much. That was. So let me take our listeners through, I suppose, somewhat of a thematic highlight reel. And I won't go all the way back, although I did, for the sake of this, I went back and looked at some of the 2007 blogs on HFS. And even then you were talking about how technology was going to effectively enable and supercharge outsourcing. But I'll go back as far as like 2012. So in 2012, one of the things that you did that was so important for me personally was you helped define and put RPA on the map, robotic process automation, for those who are not familiar. You then started to talk about this as a service economy. You started talking about the digital underbelly, about intelligent operations. And then only a few years ago, you pivoted and sort of built on that and started talking about hyper-connected sort of enterprise and economies. You talked about the digital one office. And so that led us up to somewhat recent past. And then you declared, which was awesome. It was really funny to watch just the repercussions ripples through our industry. But you declared RPA is dead. And it was interesting to see how that rippled out and energized some defensiveness, but a really good discussion about what you mean by that and what did it imply for the adoption of technology and digitization in the outsourcing and in the services world. So that's my highlight reel. Before we get to this whole COVID era, I guess where would you have gone in March, April if COVID and pandemics hadn't slammed into the entire planet? Was it more RPA is dead? What were the themes you and your team were going to be covering?
That's a great question, and if you'd spent a lot of time with us in the last couple of years in particular, I think there was a growing sense of frustration, particularly from HFS and some of our friends in the industry, that we weren't changing fast enough as as clients, as enterprises. We put out a piece with my colleague Elena Christopher recently, which was basically entitled "Don't You Wish You'd Done More" when it came to automation, because there was no burning platform for change. So we've been talking about digital transformation really since 2010 with the SMAC stack and the evolution and hyper-connected economy. But the frustration was that there was all this great technology out there, but we weren't changing as people and as companies to really embrace this. And while this has been a horrific experience for most of us, and I feel terrible when I think of people suffering right now and some of the health issues that have come out of this. This has created the burning platform that we kind of needed as an industry that wasn't transpiring. I mean, we've been doing the same things the same way, just a little faster, a little cheaper for the last 30, 40 years. Outsourcing was a way of moving work outside the country, get it done a little cheaper, maybe standardize processes a little bit. When we got into the early forms of digital, it was about how do we respond to customer needs a little quicker online. But fundamentally, no one was changing how we were doing things, how we were wiring processes, how we were changing as individuals to learn how to take better advantage of machine learning and AI and automation and RPA and all these types of things. And I was actually hosting a roundtable of CFOs literally about 8 weeks ago. And we literally went around the table and everyone was like, yeah, RPA, we looked at that, we've done that. AI, yeah, we looked at that, we've done that. They just didn't want to do anything. And I was literally banging my head against the wall thinking, we're in an industry where everyone is asleep at the wheel. People are very happy and comfortable doing the things that they've been doing for a long, long time, and no one wants to change. There's no burning platform to change. The economy's been very robust for many, many years. And things like RPA aren't happening because no one has a burning platform to invest in it and change and go through the pain of actually doing more than a single siloed project with 2 or 3 bots. So this, whether we wanted it or not, has given us a huge flaming platform to completely rethink how we run our businesses, how we do our jobs, how we interact socially with people. I was chatting earlier with the new NASCOM chairman, Pravi Rao, and we were talking about how nice it is that we're actually taking a lot of time to video people that we wouldn't have done in the past. We're doing meetings now in 30 minutes that we would have wasted a day and a half over in the past getting on a plane. We're becoming more efficient. We're actually forcing ourselves to interact and operate using video tech, using better tools, figuring out how to get our workflows going better in remote environments. So this is unexpected change. And I actually think when we eventually move on from this paradigm shift, we're going to pick up some pretty good habits. And I think we'll actually appreciate each other a bit more when we can finally sit down and look at each other in the eye and have a drink and stuff. So
that's a great point. It's the physical distance is being replaced by a virtual intimacy. And as you say, we are spending more time. If anyone follows Phil on LinkedIn, you often were regaled with pictures of Where Am I, where you had random pictures of the roof beams or a beach or some sort of skyline where you were, because you were traveling constantly, as was the nature of your role and your job in our industry. Right. And now you get to sit with your beautiful garden in your background and probably multiply your impact without having to wander and stand in queues at airports and deal with customs. And as you said, work with folks like leaders in NASCOM and elsewhere. So burning platform, fire, really, as you say, sort of billowing off of it. This was the global universal kick in the ass that we just didn't have before. There was an article that was written, I think it was in the Times, where they were talking about sort of the dynamics of BPO and sort of how things may have changed. There we go. There's your beautiful office and your garden. It's funny. It made me think back to, I think it was 2005. The World is Flat. Right, The World is Flat book comes out, and Friedman wrote it and talked about how work could now seamlessly move all over the planet. But what ultimately happened, and a point that you drew people's attention to, was infrastructure allowed that flatness to happen. It allowed us to tap into talent all over the planet. But in certain regions, the infrastructure was only as strong as it was because of these super centers, because of these sort of high-end, highly networked, sophisticated office complexes. And then COVID came, and we were forced into a situation where we had to distribute, and we had to go back into the more traditional infrastructure that was in some of these areas. Have you seen, has that been an issue with the outsourcing industry being able to sort of physically adapt and even expand on some of this digital adoption that we hope to do sooner?
I think that's a great question. And I think we called this right at the beginning that this is potentially exposing the fragility of offshore, nearshore outsourcing like never before, because this was something no one was prepared for. Okay, maybe some people had a few extra weeks than others, but no one was really prepared for this. And I think I will first start with saying I think most of the service providers have actually reacted admirably. They've gone through seismic shifts that I've never seen before to move a lot of their work into these work-at-home environments. And a lot of them are reaching stabilization now. So they've figured out how to keep the lights on with their clients. And most clients on the whole have been pretty pragmatic and reasonable that this is difficult for everybody and there needs to be a little bit of give and take and not just wave the contract at them. I think when we look at what's happening, particularly from the outsourcing industry perspective, we've just come through what I call the crisis phase, which was getting all the planning of day-to-day running, protecting people, initiating continuity planning, that sort of thing. We're now in the stabilization phase, which I think will keep us going for another month, which is really exposing things we can't do. It helps us search for the things we can do. It's forcing us to stay patient and develop contingencies. It's making us as business leaders conserve our cash and know what is available and really protect and pivot for survival. That's the situation we're in now. And we're gradually moving into what I call a realization phase, which is where we'll see companies focusing and placing their bets. We'll see the true financial income and impact to clients and customers and how this is going to truly emerge. And then we're going to pivot again for this emerging post-COVID environment. So the realization phase is when decisions are going to be made. Some are going to be tough. Some may involve M&A. Some may involve diversification or downsizing or upsizing or acquisitions, right? Some companies are doing great in this environment. We're also going to see something we're calling the unleashing of people. This is where many companies need to write a new playbook to attack new opportunities. There's no written playbook for what is happening right now. There's no defined rules, right? We've got to engage our businesses with a startup mentality. We need to have massive flexibility and adaptation. We need to be truly bonded with our customers in this shared digital environment. We have our customers and our employees working in very similar environments in a digital manner now, who need to work together in an effective way. We need to accept that change is now a new constant, and we need to keep driving new innovations and ideas. This is a time when we are truly being pulled out of our comfort zones. We need to do more than the little processes that we used to do in a little box and embrace this. We need to start really doing things differently and get ahead in this market. I don't think this is a get safe, get stable. Thank God for that. I think this is get stable and then figure out, how your business is going to operate moving forward, because some industries are going up, some are going down, some have completely crashed, and we need to figure out where our businesses are going.
Right. No, that's a tremendous call to arms by someone with so much insight. I want to take a break to just welcome people who have shared their names and their locations with us. So I wanted to say thanks so much for everybody who's joined. James McMaster, I said at the beginning. Mark Barrett, welcome. Chris Evans, Haley Core, hello, Haley. Vince Ryan, Viola Papp, hello. Richie Daigle, AJ, Hannah, hello, AJ. Kim Miller, Kim Self, sorry. You've got your whole name in there, Kim. Let's see, Leo Costa, hello. Larry Poole, welcome. Mr. Denton, thank you for the questions. I'll ask as we get through a little bit further. Simon Greenwood, so thanks so much everybody for joining. Please do share your questions. So Phil, you'd mentioned, and there's you've put out a resource, which was a great resource. It was the COVID-19 Self-Isolation Research Survival Guide. Which I love the title. It's you've got a portal on your website. You've got tremendous insight on really almost every topic under the sun that's relevant right now, including supply chains and manufacturing, including the use of AI and blockchain and the application of insight and analytics for use by CFOs, to even to customer experience and sustainability. So anybody who's looking for a point or an informed point of view on so many different topics, this is absolutely the sort of the portal and the resource to check out, and we'll put links in the show notes, et cetera. But you talked about sort of a 3-stage process. It was sort of crisis, where we have been and we're somewhat coming out of now, and this stabilization of the, oh crap, what do we do? Most of it was sending people home and with Herculean efforts by operations teams. And then you got to that realization. You said you've seen some organizations be better at both recognizing crisis and stabilizing. Was there anything that you saw in organizations that made them better at stabilizing, and anything that sets them up to be better at that realization in the next few? And I guess this is a sort of a first part question to the second part question. How long is this going to go on? I mean, you'd asked people in your survey how long they thought this was going to last, and it wasn't hours or days or weeks.
Yeah, well, we spoke with 633 enterprises in the last 2 weeks. So this data is good for about another 2 weeks, and then we're going to go again because things are changing that rapidly. So we've got a good dipstick test on the market, what's going on. And people's personal expectations across our industry are around 6 to 12 months of disruption, whereas companies are planning for 2 to 3 months. And so that tells you most enterprises are operating on a very short-term model right now, as I said, just trying to get stable, whereas people know this has got a longer run, and let's be honest, until we have a vaccine, things are never going quite back to normal. It's going to be a lot of stop and start and halfway measures and everything happening. So we just need to accept the fact that this is our reality. There's a lot we can do in this environment. We just need to get ahead of it and engage each other harder and bring it, come together more as communities, which is happening, by the way. And then looking at what companies are doing, we've got some early data to show where interests are happening in terms of technology investments. It's a big focus on cybersecurity in this market. 68% of enterprises are looking to increase investments there. Surprisingly, automation is the second highest area of focus. 55% are already looking to make increased investments in automation technologies because they're understanding you're bringing work into different environments. They're seeing the opportunities, and they're realizing we can actually automate a lot of these processes, or IT operations as well. In fact, one client we know brought 1,000 outsourced heads back from India to a European location and realized they could actually automate half the work and not even send half that work back again. So there is a strong interest in that. The issue here is how complex it is, and we've actually spent time with some of the software firms and services firms talking to them about how they can re-educate their sales team to learn how to sell complex solutions in a virtual model, because that's what's happening right now. You need to talk to a company about new RPA investments, and you're not sitting there in a room anymore with them. You're talking over video and that sort of thing. So there are challenges here, but there's a strong appetite to really make more investments in that. Obviously, cloud, multi-cloud is very high on the agenda, and AI is being looked at as a increasingly strong model. We've seen demand for chatbots, and I'm sure you guys are seeing at Sykes. That's been through the roof in the last 2 or 3 weeks. How can we implement these things quickly and easily as substitutes for call center agents? Because those are hard things to manage when a lot of them are being moved around the world. I'd like to see more interest in 5G, but that has been noticeable as well. I mean, when we're working in more environments like this, you need a better mobile infrastructure than we have in many places.
Right.
Areas that may have gone down a bit in excitement, blockchain has decreased more than it has increased in focus. Some technology areas may be put on the back burner for a little while we figure out how to just get stable. But I definitely think that'll increase and come back in time. And just think, if you take a worldwide testing program for COVID-19 across millions of people, and you need a ledger to manage this, think of the opportunities there to look at blockchain. If you can get past some of the privacy issues to help manage some of the most complex testing needs in the world that we're going to see in the coming months. So I think we're just now realizing what we need, and we're looking at how technology can help us through this.
Right. And I think you're right. There was the imperative, and we see this and I've got a question for you about the differences you might be seeing in adoption in the front office versus the back office industries. Back office, for those who aren't familiar, being accounts payable or receivable or HR transactional, versus the front office customer experience, more picking up phones and talking. As you said, I think the entire industry is realizing, especially as we've had to migrate teams so quickly, it meant that your delivery capacity fell rather drastically, and you were looking for absolutely anything to keep it running. And so we were forced to turn to technology in the form of things like chatbots and augmentation and knowledge bots, at least in the customer experience space. Are you seeing a difference in willingness or speed to adopt in those front office versus the back office environments?
So the front office is hit the hardest in this environment, and that's the data we've had come back to us from the industry. It really has been the most disrupted because a lot of the work is voice led. It's the old model of people, rammed together in call centers, managing calls. And so some volumes have spiked through the roof. Insurance, for example, is an industry that is on fire right now. Obviously, logistics and that sort of thing as well. And that industry's been really hard hit. I'm sure you're very familiar with what's happening there. I mean, one of your competitors said they literally had to close down half the company because they couldn't move them into work-at-home models. So that has driven attention to, we need to make more investments here. We can't keep going with the same old tired model that's been going for years. I think we put out a piece on it as well. I think the legacy call center market has had its come to Jesus moment in this crisis. And what's happened is we've now got, 20 million new unemployed folks in the US alone. And just think of the amount of onshore work at home call center jobs that are popping up now. There's also 300,000 vacancies at Instacart if you go on LinkedIn. So I think you're going to see a whole load of employment shifts going on because of what's happened in this industry. I think we're going to see a boom in work-at-home services that we've never seen before, and investments in customer experience and digital engagement are going to be very much put into the front office, because most of those investments, as we know, were made in the back office in recent years. People put all their bots in F&A and maybe lower risk services, but now it's moving into the front. You know, when you can't talk to an agent anymore about your needs as a customer, that's serious. So how do you get around that? How do you go into a more digital model to make that work?
Right. No, that's spectacular. So many different questions, so many different angles I can go there. But the first one that comes to mind was we always sort of stressed that digital transformation wasn't easy, it wasn't fast. You call out that BS as often as I did about it not being a panacea that you can rapidly deploy and then just achieve magic. And now we're in a situation where people are trying to achieve digital augmentation rapidly. And so are we, while finally that kick in the butt is getting us to adopt this, are we creating an intense amount of technical debt when we actually stabilize? And Richard Denton was asking the question about whether or not we are spending too much time focusing on the sexy robots versus process. Is this just making us spend more time, maybe not because robots are sexy, but because they're just critical at this moment? But fast forward 6-12 months and no one's going to know what the heck they just digitized and how to get themselves back into a sort of an operationally stable situation.
No, I think one of the big pluses of what's happened is it's forced companies to look at their very basic workflows. You know, when you have to take your customer and employee interaction and move those critical processes into a remote model, it's forced transformation, because you're looking at, well, why have we already done it? Why have we always done it this way when we could have actually done it this way? Right. And it's forced this. So a lot of companies have actually used this to make a few fixes. They've had to maybe adopt some platforms that they didn't have before. And they're forced to standardize, and they're forced to look at using tools that are more effective for them. The other thing that this is doing is it's really putting the onus back on the business to figure out what they need. And then they're looking at how can technology help them, because, you know, one of the reasons RPA was dead was people were buying bots by the bucket load and then not being able to do much with them because they were being sold something that they didn't actually know they needed. Now they're really figuring out what they need. And it's down to real business needs and issues, and how can technology help them. So how can machine learning help my business? I don't need to be an algorithmic expert to understand how machine learning can help my business. I just need to understand how to manage a provider to put these apps in. I need to know what is possible. And this is what it's forcing people to do. It's making you look at how do we generally function? How do we get technology to help us get what we need? And how do we prioritize? And there's nothing like a crisis to force you to prioritize needs over what is not maybe as important as you thought it was.
No, that's a good point. Okay, I'll pivot for a quick second because you've alluded to it, and I have too. You mentioned talking to the head of NASCOM. You've mentioned work being repatriated. You mentioned 20 million unemployed in the U.S. now. What's this mean for the traditional offshoring locations? Is India in trouble? Is the Philippines in trouble because of the way that enterprises are reacting to and responding to the pandemic right now?
It's a great question. And we've had a chance to get very close to this, very close to the point where we kind of know each of the Indian state governments and how they're working with providers. This has forced the Indian community together more than ever before to figure out how to manage this crisis. They recognize work at home was an issue for them. They're trying to figure out how to make that work better for them. But they're very robust, resilient people, and I think they'll come through this relatively unscathed. And some of them have been commendable with keeping the lights on for a lot of their mission critical areas. Yes, there have been multiple headaches and issues and pain, and some of that will come out in the coming weeks. But I think on the whole, they've figured out what is absolutely critical. So they do have some level of criticality that can remain in center to get work done. and they figured out how to manage a lot of work at home without too much latency. And also remember, most of these Indian providers on the IT side tend to carry a bench of about 12, 15% of their staff as well. So they have a little bit of flex in their system to take a bit of pain here and get through this. So I actually think they'll come out on the whole with some stronger client relationships, more resilient as an industry. They finally got their government working more effectively, I think, with their providers. And the other thing that has greatly encouraged me is the CEOs of these Indian providers, the BPOs and the ITs, they've all been talking to each other every day. Right? They're working together to try and figure out how can we help each other here? How can we maybe share some resources where you're strong and I'm not? And I think this has brought them together as a community. So I think they will come out in a commended way from this situation. They'll be slightly hurt by it, as will everybody else. They'll take a hit with some revenues. Some will do better than others, but I think on the whole, there's enough resilience in that model, and they have so much depth in IT talent that they'll come out strong, and they'll live to fight on. I'm slightly more concerned for the Philippines because they built up an incredible call center infrastructure model that everybody's relied on for years, and this has really hurt them in terms of they don't have the domestic infrastructure to facilitate work at home particularly well from the Philippines. And a lot of the call center firms have had to move the work at home jobs outside the country. And whether all those come back is questionable. And I think, oddly enough, the call center industry is going to take a harder hit than the IT industry. But it's also an opportunity for the call center firms who have really strong work at home capability and digital capability to get ahead.
Right.
And sometimes maybe some positive change will come from that.
Interesting. Well, time will tell. An overarching theme that comes up in a lot of discussions, and we've touched on it a few times here, is about partnerships and collaboration. You mentioned it yourself. Traditionally, the partnership of the provider and the buyer was a little fractious. It didn't necessarily enable innovation. It wasn't one in which there was a collaboration necessarily. It was more of a contract that you held over someone's head to achieve SLAs, reduce costs, et cetera. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think the future of buyer-provider relationships will fundamentally evolve thanks to what's really been forced upon us? If you have any chance of having your supplier continue to supply in this environment, are we going to embrace those lessons going forward?
I'd like to think there'll be some positive change in terms of a bit more trust and a shift away from this linear model where it was all about people, and increased scope was increased people, which was increased revenue. And a genuine shift to outcomes and experiences that should be how this industry starts to evolve. It's hard to get there because of changing the habits of a lifetime with these relationships. I don't think things are going to change that fundamentally in that someone buys this and someone sells this, but I think you will see some tighter relationships, some greater trust and understanding. I'm already seeing like where you get some client partners and their clients going through some very brutal moments together. This can be quite a bonding experience, and sometimes that can really lead to a healthier relationship in the future. Going through something like this together, having some mutual understanding for each other's situations, and seeing how they can deliver and help a client really keep the lights on. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. I read a blog you may have seen called The Infinite Game. The infinite mindset, which I think service providers need to adopt in this industry, which is stop just trying to be the biggest and the most profitable, and maybe think about being the best partner to your clients. Like, who is going to truly be a partner to the top 10 banks in the world for the next 20 years, right? I just think we need to get away from being the biggest and the best and think a bit more about the value equation for who has got the best client relationships, who's got the best sustainability understanding, the best philosophy, the workforce with the best culture, that sort of thing. So I think we're going to see a whole resetting of the value equations that people live by. People want to work for partners who stand for something as well. And it's not going to be all about money and profit. It's going to be about other values as well that come into play.
Outstanding. Well, you're a busy guy and you've got to get onto other calls. I'll wrap with this last question. Speaking of partners that you can count on and add value, HFS Research and the team that you've pulled together has a community in the market. You spend a lot of time sharing your insights and your experiences with them, oftentimes through physical gatherings like these roundtables that you mentioned earlier. What's the future hold for HFS, at least the near-term future, as you can't physically gather? How are you still convening your community and learning from them and sharing your insights?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we did a lot of roundtables and a couple of big summits a year because our clients love to come together and meet each other. And it was cultural. We did it because everyone wanted to go to conferences. The whole RPA industry grew up on conferences. That has shifted. And because we have such a powerful virtual community where we have 2 million visitors a year to our websites and our research POVs and everything, we have a very unique ability to bring people together virtually. I mean, we do webinars where we get 500 to 1,500 on every week. We know we can pull a crowd in. So we've moved to doing virtual roundtables. I think we just announced 6 that Haley Core is running that we rolled out this week. We are bringing together people with great ideas and initiatives to talk about all the hot topics around COVID. We're going to look at COVID by industry. We're going to look at the key trends in automation and AI in this space and process mining in these areas as well. So for us, we're nimble. We've made a very fast pivot to virtual roundtables. I'd very much like to bring everyone together again one day physically because we had to postpone our 10th anniversary party and our UK summit, which was a big disappointment to me. Yeah. But we'll make up for it by doing these virtual gatherings. We're doing like weekly webinars. We're doing our HFS Live kind of radio show as well. So we are engaging with our community more than ever before, and we have a very engaged community more than ever before as well. And we have more time on our hands to take care of it. So I feel very fortunate and blessed that we have a business that was quite well built for this type of environment.
That's great. Well, speaking of time, we're all out of it, but I do want to thank you again, Phil, for both spending your time with me on this show. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us. There was an outstanding turnout. It was very exciting. And thank you, Phil, for your insights, for declaring RPA was a thing, for declaring it was dead, for sharing your insight on how our global industry can harness technology, harness change and innovation, can create great experiences, and go forward, create great partnerships and alliances to continue to serve clients. So with that, everyone, thanks again for tuning into OneTAKE, and we will come at you again very soon. Thank you so much.
Cheers, thanks.